All right, good afternoon. The Secretary General spoke at the ceremony this morning to mark the International Day of Commemoration in memory of victims of the Holocaust. He said, as we remember the Holocaust victims, we also reaffirm our resolve to fight the hatred that still plagues our world today. He said that he wished to sound an alarm today. Not only is anti-Semitism still strong, it is getting worse. We must rise up against rising anti-Semitism, he told the audience. According to the Anti-Defamation League, he noted anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. increased by 57% in 2017. The European Union's Fundamental Rights Agency reported last year that 28% of Jews had experienced some form of harassment for being Jewish. And other communities are also facing greater harassment, the Secretary General warned, saying that demonization of others rages on. Such hatred is easy to uncork, he said, but very hard to put back in the bottle. The Secretary General also discussed the lessons of the Holocaust when he spoke Saturday morning at a special service at the Park East Synagogue in Manhattan. And as part of today's events, in remembrance of the Holocaust, there's the opening of the exhibit Beyond Duty, Diplomats Recognized as Righteous Among Nations. That's at 1:15 to 2:30 p.m. in the visitors lobby. There'll be an event which the Secretary General will attend. There will also be a panel discussion entitled India, a Distant Haven During the Holocaust from 3 to 4:15 in Conference Room 2. And this evening, there's the opening of exhibit of Bracha, A Blessing Back to Polish Shtetls. That's from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. at the South Wall Conference Building. For events for the coming days, please look at the week ahead. And Martin Griffiths, the special envoy for Yemen, is on his way to Sana'a today. He then intends to go to Hodeidah on Tuesday and be back in Amman on Thursday. Mr. Griffiths has emphasized to the parties that the UN is committed to staying the course to help the parties implement the Stockholm Agreement fully and rapidly. Both parties continue to demonstrate political will in abiding by the Stockholm Agreement, and he believes that both parties are constructively and seriously engaged in implementing the agreement. Yesterday, the humanitarian coordinator for Yemen, Lise Grande, condemned the January 26th shelling of a collective center for internally displaced people in Harada district in Hajj Governorate, during which 8 people were killed and 30 others were wounded. She also expressed her condolences to all the families impacted by the attack. Any attack on a civilian is unconscionable and a clear violation of international law, she said. And the Undersecretary General for Peacekeeping Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, is in N'Djamena in Chad, where this morning he attended a memorial organized by the government to pay tribute to 10 Chadian peacekeepers killed in last Sunday's attack in Mali. Mr. Lacroix praised the heroism of the Chadian contingent in not only repelling a well-coordinated attack and protecting many lives in Aguelok, but also in taking every precaution in avoiding civilian casualties. He also conveyed to the UN's immense gratitude for Chad's commitment to the restoration of peace and security in Mali and the Sahel, and he noted that Chad has the highest number of fatalities of any UN mission in Mali. The Undersecretary General, accompanied by the head of the UN mission in Mali, also met with President Deby of Chad. And also on peacekeeping, our colleagues say that a 2-day event on women, peace, and security kicked off today in Addis Ababa in preparation for the 2019 UN Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference due to take place in New York in March. Ethiopian President Zewde and Secretary General Special Representative for the African Union, Hannah Tate, addressed the gathering, which is co-hosted by Ethiopia, Canada, and brings together member states, troops and police contributing countries, civil society, academia, and UN officials. The meeting aims to develop concrete proposals for the advancement of women, peace, and security in the context of Secretary General's Action for Peacekeeping Initiative, as well as to elicit pledges and actions ahead of the Peacekeeping Ministerial Conference. And over the weekend, you saw we issued 2 statements, one condemning the terrorist attack that took place at Jolo Cathedral in the Philippines, and the second also expressing the Secretary General's sorrow, the terrible loss of life and significant damage to people's homes and environmental caused by the collapse of a dam in Brazil. And as you know, also on Saturday, the Security Council met to discuss the situation in Venezuela. Council members heard from Undersecretary General for for Political and Peace-Building Affairs, Rosemary DiCarlo, who stressed the need to bring about a political solution that will allow the country's citizens to enjoy peace, prosperity, and all human rights. And today, the UNHCR IOM Special Representative for Venezuelan Refugees and Migrants, Eduardo Stein, issued a statement praising the exemplary solidarity and generosity of Latin American countries have shown towards people fleeing Venezuela. However, he expressed a concern over the violent actions and threats against Venezuelan citizens that have taken place in recent days. He called these incidents of xenophobia extremely worrying and called on governments and societies to respond with a clear and forceful message of rejection. And a new report released by the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the World Food Programme, shows that the link between conflict and hunger remains persistent and deadly. The report prepared for the UN Security Council estimates that around 56 million people are in need of urgent food and livelihood assistance across 8 conflict zones around the world, including in Yemen, Afghanistan, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Last May, the Council adopted Resolution 2417, which condemns starvation as a tool of war and calls on all parties to armed conflict to comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law to minimize the impact of military actions on civilians, including on food production and distribution. And as we come to a close with January, the number of member states paid their regular budget dues in full for 2019. We wish to thank Bulgaria, Denmark, Netherlands, Tuvalu, and Ukraine for their payments. The honor roll now stands at a healthy 25. Michelle.
Thanks, Steph. I have an initial question and some follow-ups. On Venezuela, the opposition leader, Juan Guaido, sent a letter to the SG on Saturday night, basically requesting UN help with humanitarian aid and coordination. First of all, would you like to respond to that letter?
Yes. Yes, we've seen the tweets that include the letter. We're verifying the authenticity, and a response will be considered.
And if you could remind us and the viewers out there, what kind of presence does the UN currently have in Venezuela?
Well, the UN has a country team. Obviously, the focus of the country team has been on working through with the Venezuelan people on our existing development assistance framework, which right now is focusing on areas of health and nutrition, and obviously also having to do with the broader framework having to do with Venezuelan refugees and migrants which have left the country. But we're obviously, I think, as Ms. DiCarlo had said, and has the Secretary General has repeatedly said that he's concerned about the situation, the humanitarian situation, and reiterates his call on all relevant actors to commit to inclusive, credible political dialogue to address the protracted crisis through peaceful means, full respect of the law and human rights.
One last follow-up. Previously, the Maduro government has denied that there is a sort of humanitarian crisis that needs UN help. Given that the Maduro government still holds the seat here at the UN, could the SG decide to work with Guaido? Can you explain to us how that might work, given that officially the Maduro government is still recognised by the UN?
Sure. I mean, just a couple of points on principle, because I think this question has come up again and again. The Secretary General of the United Nations does not have the authority to grant recognition of member states or of leaders. We've obviously taken note of the respective positions by member states. The recognition of a head of state of a country is a matter for member states. We have not, as the Secretary, have not received any information there's been any changes in the government of the country. It would come through a permanent mission, and so far there's been no changes. Yeah. So Michelle, let's please. Please, I know it's the last one, but let's share a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Stéphane. Just following on Venezuela, the NGO Foro Penal has said that 850 people have been detained, among them 77 minors. Mm-hmm. And also they talked about 35 people dead in Venezuela since the 23rd, which is when Guaido took power in front of, or took about to go into being the interim president of Venezuela. What is the position from the Secretary General in terms of making a call for stop violence? We understand that that's something that he has done in the past to try to get to a dialogue. But what are the concerns in terms of what it could happen when we're talking about 77 minors being detained, where it has been different reports of people being killed on the outskirts of different neighborhoods of Caracas, and where we have political detainees that might be in danger and they don't have the guarantees?
Sure. I mean, we and the Secretary General have expressed his concern over the reports of casualties in the demonstrators. I would refer you to the statements made by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, also on Venezuela, and we share those concerns. And I think Ms. DiCarlo outlined that very clearly in her statement to the Security Council on Saturday.
Is Ms. Bachelet going to visit Venezuela? Because one of the things that she had mentioned, I mean, the government of Maduro said that they want her there and that they are welcoming.
I'm not aware, but we're happy to check. Okay. Yep.
A quick follow-up also on Venezuela, Steph, but this on something that happened on Saturday in the context of the meeting of the Security Council. There was a meeting between the delegation of the U.S. and some representatives from Juan Guaidó. So I just want to ask if there was any UN presence at this meeting between the U.S. and the Guaidó mission, and if for whatever reason Juan Guaidó has reached out to you in any capacity.
No, there's been, beyond the tweets that we've all seen, there's been no contact that I'm aware of, and there was no UN present at that meeting. Monsieur?
On Venezuela too, on Saturday there was a country who asked to have a Gutierrez mediation in Venezuela. What is your answer?
The Secretary General's good officers are always available, but it obviously good officers have to be accepted by all parties concerned. Yep.
Thanks, Stéphane. A question on Turkey and the Khashoggi investigation. The special rapporteur from the UN, Agnes Kalamat, is over in Turkey now. She's requested access from the Saudis to the Saudi consulate so she can do her investigation. What does Mr. Guterres think? Should the Saudis let her inside the building?
Look, Ms. Kalamat operates under a very independent mandate from the Secretary General. She has her mandate. She's following it. As a matter of principle, we do encourage all member states to cooperate with the human rights mechanisms.
Can I just do a follow-up on that?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, since the Khashoggi thing started, there have been loads and loads of questions to you about, should there be a UN investigation, et cetera, et cetera. And now there is kind of this UN investigation, but it's quite hard to explain this to readers and viewers, how this might differ from one that's by the Security Council or from the Secretary General. So, how would you represent what kind of investigation this is? Is it serious and credible, or is it just one woman's opinion?
I think your job to make the complicated UN simple is what I expect journalists to do. Don't expect me to do it. That being said, Ms. Kalamat is a special rapporteur. She does not report to the Secretary General. She has a specific mandate. She's acting on that mandate. The fact that she is acting on that mandate does not mean that a request has been received by the Secretary General from any member states to conduct an investigation. That situation is unchanged. Yep.
Yes, Stéphane. A question on Yemen. Building on the comments you gave us from Lisa Grande and the most recent days, it involves the Red Sea mills. Now, this strike last week, which appears to have destroyed a lot of grain. There's a story out today from Hodeidah pointing out that access has still not been given to access, I think it's now 51,000 tons of grain that's stored in the Red Sea mills. Just following up on the comments you made here a little while back about the apparent agreement to gain access, why did that not happen? And what's the Secretary General's latest position in terms of the parties making that deal happen so that food can be distributed?
Mr. General Cammert and Martin Griffiths are working with the parties to operationalize what was agreed to in Stockholm. What is clear is that the continued conflict, the fact that not everything has been operationalized, is having an immediate impact on the humanitarian situation of the people in Yemen. One of the reasons we focused on Hodeidah is its importance in terms of humanitarian aid distribution, and the aid that is already there or that we need to get there needs to be distributed without any hindrance.
Sorry, just a very quick follow-up. What are the specific issues, though, that are blocking it?
I'm not going to sort of micro report from what is going on the ground, unfortunately. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a question on Hodeidah and again another one on Bahrain. On Hodeidah, what are the sticking points in implementation of Stockholm? Is it interpretation of the Stockholm Agreement or what? What is the sticking thing?
The difficulty is that this conflict has been going on for a number of years. There is a lack of trust, and the UN on the ground is trying to bridge that trust.
On Bahrain, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
On Bahrain, today the Bahraini authorities have reinstated or reconfirmed the sentence of Sheikh Ali Salman, the Secretary General of the Wafaq Society. It's the society we know which has been dismantled by the government. So what is the position of the Secretary General regarding
Let me see.
that?
I haven't seen that report. I will check. It's on.
Stéphane, a 38 years old Palestinian was killed by a settler, and he was shot in his back, according to Palestinian medical reports. Do you have any comments?
I would refer you to what Mr. Mladenov had said on this already.
Okay, so Mr. Mladenov said that he is...
You've learned.
That he's shocked about what happened. Do you consider this a terrorist attack? Do you consider the actions of settlers against Palestinians to be terrorist attacks against civilians?
I will leave it right now for Mr. Mladenov to speak, who speaks for the Secretary General. Yep.
I follow up on Venezuela. You said that UN cannot recognize the new leader.
I said, just to be clear, the Secretary General, the UN has lots of moving parts. I speak for the Secretary General. Obviously, the General Assembly can make decisions, Security Council can make decisions. We're talking about the Secretary General.
Okay, does that mean that Secretary General does not support him as well, or he cannot support him as a new leader as well?
For the Secretary General is not in the business of deciding who is the head of state of a country and recognizing a government. We work on an everyday basis through the permanent mission of Venezuela, and we continue to do so. And our team on the ground, which is doing also a lot of work on humanitarian issues, continues to work with the government. Stefano.
Yes, a question is on a situation on the Mediterranean between Libya and Sicily in this moment. There is another boat that rescued migrants. Is now off Sicily with 47 migrants, then for a few days. Some are also minors, and the ports of Italy are closed. The UN already said that they should open ports for humanitarian reasons and so on. But this is actually continues to happen. And the Italian authorities say that the ship being a Dutch ship, I mean the flag being Dutch.
Caro, una domanda, per favore.
Well, I think who listens has to know also the background.
But
the question is, the Italian authorities say that the ship should go to the Dutch should take care of the ship because it's a Dutch ship. What is the UN position in this? Should the ship arrive to the closest port? Or
what is important is that these people who are making these harrowing journeys be treated with dignity and with respect. It should not be bounced around, and that obviously there needs to be some European-wide decisions. But for any further detail, I'd refer you to UNHCR or IOM. Madame, and then Monsieur.
Thank you, Stéphane. Saturday at the Security Council meeting, the Russian ambassador accused the German representative of inciting...
Did what to the German?
He accused the German representative of inciting the situation in Venezuela when there had been calls to reduce tension, and today Guaido is calling for increased demonstrations, which appears to be an escalation. And as a follow-up, why would, since two permanent members of the Security Council and many other countries recognize President Maduro, why would the Secretary General be expected to recognize the self-proclaimed opposition leader?
I don't know how to answer your second one. On your first observation, the Secretary General has called and repeats his call for maximum restraint and avoid an escalation of violence and a scenario where we find Venezuelans confronting each other.
Merci, Monsieur Dujarric. First, I have on former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia and Greece, very many prominent European parliamentarians proposed, both prime ministers of Greece, Alexis Tsipras and Mr. Zoran Zaev of Macedonia, to be candidate for the Nobel Peace Prize. What does the Secretary General means on that, and whether he would support that for his own opinion? And then I have a follow-up.
Right, well, there are a lot of things we don't do. We don't recognize heads of states, and we don't give out the Nobel Peace Prize. Obviously, we think that this is a wonderful example of diplomacy. Right, it took a long time, and I think the Greek, the two leaders are to be commended, and I also think the work of Ambassador Nimitz, who has worked on this year in and year out in the face of very, very difficult odds, shows that diplomacy does take some time, but in the end, it avoids confrontation.
And also, if I may follow up on one of the previous...
Sure.
Thank you. On James' question, actually, on Mr. Khashoggi, does the Secretary General fully support and back the independent investigation of human rights representative, number one? And number two, does it mean, whatever you answer to James, that now Secretary General totally consider that ball is not in his court and he is not even called to comment on that?
No, not at all. The ball often has a way of finding itself back into the Secretary General's court. So I would not interpret what I said as that. It's not for the Secretary General to comment on the details of Madame Calamar's work. It is, as you said it yourself, an independent investigation. As a matter of principle, the Secretary General thinks that the work of the special mechanism, special rapporteurs, is very important, and countries should cooperate with them. Michelle, then Nizar, and then Stefano.
Two quick follow-ups. It sounds like you haven't actually received Guaido's letter yet. Physically have a copy of it?
We've seen it on Twitter.
Okay. And is the SG limited in how he can respond in terms of offering assistance, given that the UN seat is held by Maduro's government?
We work, as with any country, we work with the agreement, the permission of member states. The UN doesn't operate independently, and we obviously, our colleagues on the ground are already working, including UNICEF, PAHO, scaling up assistance, obviously subject to available resources. Any humanitarian action, as a matter of principle, should be independent of politics, economic, or military, or any other objective. But you've been here long enough, Michelle, that you know how the UN operates. We don't go in without specific mandates. The Secretary General's focus remains on the people of Venezuela. Nizar.
Yeah. On this agreement at Doha between Taliban and the United States, has UNAMA been involved in any way in these discussions?
I'm not aware that they've not been involved in the discussions, as far as I'm aware.
But you are following what's happening?
Of course.
And what do you think? Did you have any
It's
position
a matter
on
of
that?
principle. We're always for dialogue. Stefano.
This is a follow-up of Venezuela. Just to clarify, the idea of a new election for the Secretary General is a good idea in this moment, like that Maduro, let's say, will allow new elections in Venezuela?
I'm not going to comment on any hypotheticals. Yes.
Well, it's been requested by important countries.
I understand. I'm not commenting on that.
In this process, will be the Secretary General willing?
Sorry, in what?
In this process, the Venezuela is going through. Will the Secretary General be willing to meet with Guaido, possibly travel to Venezuela and meet with both parties? We understand he cannot take sides, but would that be a possibility?
The Secretary General's good offices, as he said, clearly remain available to the parties. Monica, you remain available to the press, and it's all yours. Thank you.